While the Old Forester family has a vast array of flavor profiles to each individual product, no better to exhibit the classic Old Forester flavor than the 86 proof. Now, Old Forester does have 18% rye in its mash bill, and that's going to give us some really nice punches of spice as we sip through. But on the nose, the brown sugar and banana that come through, definitely attributes from our significantly unique yeast strain that we use, and also from those barrels that we custom make ourselves. There's always a nice hint of citrus, always a nice hint of orange specifically, a nice fresh orange zest going on. Now, vanilla is always a given. That's sort of like the free bingo space on the card for bourbons, if you will. But it's this nice, rich, sultry vanilla bean that comes through with the 86 proof. But it's not overpowering. There's some nice rose notes, mint comes through, and on the finish, definitely a little bit of dill from that rye contribution, and it always finishes nice and dry. So Old Forester's always sweet on the front end, spicy on the back end, but it is a classic example of a Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey.
In a glass of Woodford Reserve, there are over 200 flavor notes. And picking out those flavor notes is an art. I like to call it dissecting your bourbon glass. So let's go ahead and get started. First, it's always nice to use a tulip-shaped glass. So right now we have a Glencairn glass, but really if you have a small sort of wine glass at home, that will work too. Or if you only have a rocks glass, you'll be just fine. I always start my tasting by just wafting it under the nose, and that's where all the lightest notes are going to live. So for me right now, I'm getting beautiful, delicate vanilla notes, a little bit of marshmallow. I can see that toasted marshmallow developing. And of course, that signature rose petal note that you'll find in Woodford. Now go ahead and get your nose deeper into the glass. And that's where that richness starts to develop. Brown sugar, cinnamon, there's a little hint of clove, citrus, orange. You get that apple, red apple really is standing out nicely. Now go ahead and swirl your glass. And this is gonna bring out that spice note. Peppermint, spearmint. I get just plain black pepper, a little cedar wood, even pine. Citrus oils. Now go ahead and give it a taste. And I typically do my tastings in 3 sips. First sip to think about just warming up your palate. Second sip, how does it feel on your palate? And third sip is the finish. So smooth, 90.4 proof, hits your palate nicely. There's no shock there, just easy to sip on. Now I'm getting flavor notes of honey. And again, that orange is really standing out nicely, but I get lemon. There's some dried cranberry in there as well, a little hint of raisin. And then as it sits on your palate, I get that pecan and some of those tea notes and a little bit of, even a little hint of leather in there. And that toasted oak is just beautiful and just sits nicely. What I love about Woodford Reserve is that it has a beautifully long finish. So you sip and you savor. Enjoy.
So here we have our Gentleman Jack Tennessee whiskey. The thing that makes our Gentleman Jack whiskey different from the classic Old No. 7 is simply the charcoal mellowing process. So you'll see here on the Gentleman Jack it says double mellowed. So while all of our whiskeys get that first round of charcoal mellowing prior to being aged in that new charred oak barrel, Gentleman Jack will get a second pass through some more charcoal after it comes out of that barrel. So a telltale sign is actually the color. You can notice that there's a slightly lighter color to the Gentleman Jack whiskey. So the charcoal, remember, this is a filtration process. This is not an additive process. So it's actually removing a little bit. So the first round of the charcoal mellowing, it absorbs all of the kind of cooked corn, cereal grain, oiliness, removes that from the spirit as it goes into that new oak barrel. And then the second mellowing is a little bit different. Instead of 10 feet, we only use 3 feet of charcoal. And the whiskey is passed through the charcoal in just minutes instead of days. So the result is just a slightly softer, lighter color of whiskey which gives us that indication of less barrel impact on the flavor of the whiskey. So as you nose and taste the Gentleman Jack, you really get those soft, sweet notes, tip of the tongue, the fruitiness that comes across, a little bit of apple, a little bit of banana, caramel in the mid palate with just a touch of oak, and then a soft, clean finish. Really is an exceptionally smooth whiskey, all due to that second passing through the charcoal after it comes out of the barrel. So here we have our Jack Daniel's Single Barrel Select Whiskey. This is one of my favorite whiskeys that we make here in Lynchburg. The first thing that I notice about our single barrel whiskeys, that great color that you see there in the bottle. So that gives us a really good indication of the flavor that's to come. That nice, deep, rich, almost a little bit of red hue streaking through the whiskey. It really tells us about the extraction that's happened during this maturation process. So our single barrel whiskeys always come from the top floors of only certain barrel houses that we know will produce this flavor and aroma that we know as single barrel Jack Daniel's whiskeys. And so on the top floor of our barrel houses, the reason that we're looking there is because we don't artificially heat and cool our houses. Mother Nature gets really nice and hot here in southern Middle Tennessee in the summers. That will cause the whiskey to expand and go deep into the barrels, almost all the way through the pores. And then in the wintertime, when it gets cold, that whiskey will contract back out into the middle of the barrel. That interaction of whiskey and wood is where all this color and flavor is going to come from, right? So even though on the top floors, we see a greater angel share or evaporation of the whiskey, what that's going to lead to is more concentration of the great color and great flavor of the whiskey that we're going to taste. So real quick, with our single barrel whiskey, right away on the nose, you get a really nice big caramel, toasted oak, a little bit of smoke on the nose. On the palate, that classic hallmark Jack Daniel's kind of sweet entry across the tip of the tongue, a little bit of candied fruit. As it rolls in the mid palate though, you get a nice sweet butterscotch, a heaviness and a creaminess is the texture of the whiskey. And then in the finish, a little bit of smoke, a little bit of barrel char, and some of the spice that we're getting from that 8% rye in the grain bill. Now, with single barrel whiskeys, you will get that barrel to barrel variation. As many things as we can do to make a consistent whiskey here, at the end of the day, Mother Nature always wins out. So we individually number the neck of every single one of our single barrel bottles. If you find one that you love, if you go back and you find that same number, that's the barrel number. You'll know that that bottle came from that exact same barrel. However, if you find a different number on the label, you're going to know that you got whiskey from a different single barrel, and you'll get to enjoy a little bit of a variation of flavor.